Today we say goodbye to Fez and embark on the long journey to Efraud via Midelt and the Ziz Gorge. Our first brief stop of the day was at the university town of Ifrane. Created in the days of the French Protectorate, the whole atmosphere was totally un-Moroccan and more like a European town. Quite strange. Moving on through Middle Atlas, the landscape begins to change. We make another short stop to see the wild macaque monkeys, who were nevertheless well geared up for tourists. These are North Africa's only monkey, and most of them live in these cedar forests in the Middle Atlas. They're well used to tourists and very cheeky. Photographs? Just happy to oblige. Back on the road, we're in the heart of the Berber country. "12 o'clock and we reach the outskirts of Midelt and are taken to an area where a number of restaurants have row upon row of tagines waiting for hungry travellers. We settled at an outside table that Hassan had pre-booked for us. It was a great feast with one large tagine amply feeding 2 people. Sue and I had lamb, which was excellent. A quick look at the shops and we were back on the road, travelling south to the Ziz Gorge, where the country becomes more arid as it reaches the plains. Later in the afternoon we made another stop at this oasis, ready to watch the sun go down. As we continued across the desert, Hassan took the opportunity to explain some of the local religion and customs to us.
His ancestors, they are from the south, from this area. And as I said,
we then reached our hotel in Air Rashida, where we had a picnic supper by the pool, and Hassan gave us a briefing and options for an overnight stay at a Berber camp. 12 of us opted to go, and it was decided that we would split into 2 parties. The first travelling all the way by camel, and the second would go part way in a 4x4 and meet up with the others and continue to the camp together. Friday morning and we arrived at Rissani and met up with Ali, who was to be our guide until lunchtime. He proved to be quite a character and spoke really good English. Before moving on, we have a brief look at the main gate to Rissani, which is a small town on the edge of the Sahara Desert. After a short drive south, we reached the mausoleum of Moulay Ali Shari, who was the founder of the Alawite dynasty. It was a beautifully tranquil place with lots of trees and shady corners. Ali explained that he was a Tuareg and told us about the Alawite Berber dynasty and the distinctive blue boo-boo clothing that he wears. He said that the mausoleum had been rebuilt in 1955 after it had been badly damaged by serious flooding. We then sauntered through the courtyards and gardens around the mausoleum. Non-Muslims are not permitted in the burial chamber, so we could only get a glimpse of the inside.
Done by hand. Can you see the ceiling here? You can take a picture of the ceiling.
All in all, it was just a beautiful place to visit. Just behind the mausoleum are the ruins of the 19th century Abba Qasar, a former residence that housed exiled princes and the widows of sultans. Nearby there's another fortified village, which is derelict but surprisingly still partly occupied. We could hear the children from behind hidden doorways. It was all pretty basic, with the occupants just scratching a living. Just down the road there was another part of a fortified complex which is being restored. It is still in the early stages of restoration, but it's possible to get a good impression of how the place was. Our last stop of the morning was at a carpet house, where we were shown a dazzling array of rugs, carpets and wall coverings.
Men make jewelry and children.
Okay, so
Another nice ice was kitten. Lavender color.
Not surprisingly, some of our party flexed their credit cards and made a few purchases. It all took quite a while, but eventually we moved to our hotel for a late lunch. Later in the afternoon, and 6 of us have piled into a 4x4 and are crossing the desert. On our way, we stop at a small settlement, where we are given tea and entertained by local tribesmen. The whole thing was very entertaining, but we were soon back in the 4x4, now quite close to the Algerian border. After a while we spotted this old bike in the middle of nowhere. Then we were told that it belonged to one of the miners who eke out a living from finding minerals and metals. There wasn't an awful lot to see, but they did have 1 or 2 quite interesting stones for sale. Moving on, we made a brief stop at this Berber camp and had a chat with the occupants, who were quite friendly, probably used to foreign visitors. It was all very basic. Now for the main event, which was to meet our camels that were going to transport us to a rendezvous with the rest of the party.
Chewy caramel.
We would then join them for the final leg of the journey to the Berber camp.
Macchiato. Frap. Black with 2 sugars.
Climbing aboard was quite an experience, and I soon realised that getting any decent video was a tall order. It was a question of hanging on for grim death and trying not to get thrown off. Unfortunately, Jonathan did get thrown off, but it was not recorded on camera. After half an hour or so, we saw our colleagues coming across the dunes, so it was time for a brief stop and a catch up on our adventures. Getting off proved to be just as hazardous as getting on. All great fun. A little later we made our way to the Berber camp, watched the sun go down and got ready for our evening meal. After a welcoming cup of tea and biscuits, we settled into a traditional meal of soup, followed by a tasty chicken tagine with fruit to round it off, all served by Hassan and one of the local tribesmen. It was then off to our tents with lots of blankets for a cold night. 6:30 AM and we are all up and about getting ready for morning tea whilst watching the sun come up. The camels and the 4x4 arrive and we prepare to return to our hotel for a hot shower and breakfast. All in all, it's been a great experience in spite of the cold night and the Berber beds. It has given us all just a small insight into the Berber way of life and culture, which is having to change and adapt to the 21st century.
I threw me leg over him, hateful doodle.
I'm just settling down and suddenly you're up. And guess what? You feel
For our part, we were glad to return to warm beds and hot showers. Fed and watered, we're back on the road by 9:45 AM and making our way across country to Erfraud. After an hour or so, we stop at this fossil workshop, where they specialise in extracting and working ammonites from the nearby quarries in the Sahara Desert. The area of Erfraud was once a seabed, where many types of marine animals existed which are now extinct. Many of the fossils are perfectly preserved and are worked into decorative panels, tables and ornate fountains, as well as smaller individual pieces. Like most things in Morocco, it is very labour intensive and highly skilled. Of course, at the end of the visit we are shown lots of items for sale, of which many are far too big for the suitcase. Another short stop and we see this ancient disused water irrigation system which dates back many thousands of years. The system links a number of underground wells and boreholes through a maze of canals which provide abundant water for palm groves and fields. Late afternoon and we find ourselves in our hotel at Taina Her, relaxing before a walk around the edge of the town, where we're going to pick up supplies ready for our trek tomorrow. We're all quite tired after our night at the Berber camp and returned for a meal at the hotel and an early night. Sunday morning and a 6 AM alarm call to get us up and out for an 8 AM start on our trek up the Todra Gorge. It was going to be a tough day, so I decided to leave the video camera behind and rely on stills taken by the group. The tracks were quite rough with lots of loose rocks, but Hassan knew the best paths and John also had a guide dog who appeared to know the route for a large part of the way. We'd almost reached the top when we came upon this Berber camp and stopped for a welcome cup of tea. A few people live in the caves here for most of the year round and only move lower down the mountain in the harshest weather. There's no electricity and water is brought up every day by donkey. They make a simple living from their goats and a little income from us tourists. Over the top of the mountain we begin to make our way down along the rocky path. This part of the journey was almost tougher than the climb up, with the loose rocks and hopping from boulder to boulder playing havoc with knees. Eventually we caught sight of the village below and made our way through the valley to a restaurant. The whole trek took 5 hours and some very tired people arrived in the village for a welcome lunch stop. Next morning, after a good night's rest, we go down the road to the local Monday market. Quite a revelation. An abundance of beautifully fresh produce with all kinds of fruit, dates and vegetables. Hassan shows us a writing tablet that the children use to copy the Quran. There was also no shortage of second-hand goods of every description. There was also couscous by the sackful of every type and quality. You want pots and pans? They're here in all shapes and sizes. Back on the road we passed through the famed rose country to Quaracquazato and a brief stop outside the famed Atlas movie studios, where hundreds of films have been shot, including parts of The Mummy, Gladiator and more recently Game of Thrones. We arrive at our hotel at 2:15 and go straight to the pool for an alfresco picnic. The terrace overlooks the nearby fortified town of El Benhado, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's quite breezy here, and Janet manages to lose her hat in the pool. Next we meet Hassan at 4 p.m. for a short walk from the village to the fortified town. As we cross the Wadi Mela to reach the entrance gate, we are engulfed in a mini dust storm sweeping through the valley. Safely inside, we wander up through the narrow streets where a number of movies have been filmed, all very atmospheric. At the very top, the view over the valley is stunning, although quite windy. Eventually we make our way back to the hotel and an evening meal of real Berber omelette